All right, let's talk about something a lot of homeowners around here put off way longer than they should. Your concrete driveway. Specifically, that crack you've been stepping over for the last 2 years, quietly hoping it sorts itself out. It doesn't, concrete doesn't heal. So the real question you're sitting on is this: do I patch it, or do I tear it out and start fresh? And that's a fair thing to be stuck on, because the gap between those two answers is a few $100s on one end and several thousand on the other. Nobody wants to spend replacement money on a driveway that just needed a good repair. And nobody wants to sink $2 grand into fixes on a slab that's going to fail again next spring anyway. So let me give you the actual framework, the one we use when we walk a driveway. Here's the short version. If your cracks are under a 1/4 inch wide, the slab still sits level, and water still runs off it the way it's supposed to, you're a repair. That's it. Don't let anyone talk you out of it. But if sections have settled at different heights, if cracks are running wider than 1/2 inch, or if the surface has crumbled down to the point where you can see the stone aggregate across big areas, then replacement is the only thing that actually lasts. Everything else lives in the messy middle, and what decides it is almost never what you're looking at on top. It's what's happening underneath. Let's start with the cracks, because that's what you're staring at. Here's the thing most people get backwards. Crack width tells you far more than crack count. A driveway with 20 little hairline cracks running through it is often in better shape than one with a single wide crack. Why? Because hairlines are usually just concrete doing what concrete does. It cures, it shrinks, it moves with the seasons. That's normal. Seal those, keep an eye on them, get on with your life. Once you're at 1/8 to a 1/4 inch with clean level edges, you're looking at surface stress, but the base underneath is probably still solid. That gets rooted out and filled. 1/4 to a 1/2 inch still level means there's active movement and water's getting down in there. Time to bring somebody in. But over 1/2 inch, or, and this is the big one, any crack where one side sits higher than the other, that's a different animal entirely. I want you to go out and actually run your hand across your cracks. Feel for a lip. If one side of that crack has dropped or lifted even a little bit, the soil underneath has moved. And no surface patch on earth is going to hold that together, because you'd be gluing the top of a problem that lives 2 feet down. That vertical displacement is base failure, and base failures come back every single spring until somebody rebuilds the slab properly. Now, why does this happen so much around here? Because southeastern Wisconsin is genuinely rough on concrete. We run through dozens of freeze-thaw cycles between November and April. Not one long freeze, dozens of little ones. Water sneaks into a crack, freezes overnight, expands, and pries that crack open a fraction of a millimeter. Then it thaws, more water gets in, and it does it again. Do that 40 times a winter for 10 winters, and you can see where it ends up. Then add salt. Everything you track home off Sheridan Road and Highway 50 ends up sitting on your driveway. That salt chews at the paste on the surface of the concrete chemically, while the freeze-thaw is working on it mechanically. It's a two-front attack. And underneath all of it, we've got clay. A lot of Kenosha County sits on clay soil, and clay holds water instead of draining it away. So if your driveway was poured over clay that wasn't compacted properly, it's going to move seasonally no matter how good the concrete mix was. That's not a workmanship problem with the pour. It's a problem with what's under the pour. Okay. So say your base is sound and you're in repair territory. What does repair actually look like? There are 4 common approaches. Crack sealing, where we route the crack out into a clean channel and fill it with a flexible polyurethane or an epoxy. Slab jacking, where we pump foam or grout underneath a section that's sunk and lift it back up to where it belongs. Partial replacement, where we saw cut 1 or 2 failed panels, repair just those, and leave the rest of your driveway alone. And resurfacing, where a thin overlay gets bonded over a surface that's structurally fine but looks rough. I'll be honest, slab jacking is underused around here, and it's a shame. If you've got a section that's dropped 1 inch at your garage apron, that can often be lifted for a fraction of what a replacement costs. The catch is the slab itself has to still be in one piece. If it's fractured into chunks, there's nothing solid left to lift. Now let me say something about resurfacing, because it gets oversold. An overlay is usually a 1/4 inch to a 1/2 inch thick. That's it. And it inherits every single flaw beneath it. If the base is moving, that overlay cracks in exactly the same places within about 2 seasons. If your existing surface is spalling and loose, the bond fails and the whole thing starts peeling off in sheets. It looks great for a while, and then it looks worse than what you started with. Resurfacing works on one specific driveway. Structurally sound, no settlement, minor surface wear, and you just want it looking new again. Outside of those conditions, it buys you 2 or 3 years, not 20. Let's talk money, because that's what this really comes down to. These are typical ranges for residential work around Kenosha, and things like site access and how much tear-out is involved will move the number. Crack sealing usually runs somewhere between $300 and $900 and gets you 3 to 5 years. Slab jacking, $600 to $2,000, and that lasts 10 years or more. Panel replacement, $1,200 to $3,000, and that's a 25-year fix. Resurfacing runs about $3 to $7 a square foot for 5 to 10 years. Full replacement is $8 to $15 a square foot, and that's 30 years plus. Here's the part people skip. Run the math over time, not at the moment you're writing the check. Spending $2,500 on repairs to a driveway that's going to need replacing in 4 years costs you more than just replacing it today. But the reverse is just as true. Tearing out a whole slab because one corner settled throws away thousands of dollars of perfectly good concrete. There's a rough threshold I'd give you. Call it the 30% rule. Once more than about 30% of your driveway surface is showing real structural damage, replacement usually comes in cheaper than doing repairs in stages. Below that, targeted fixes make sense. Above it, you're just repairing the same driveway over and over while the sections you haven't touched fail on their own schedule. Age factors in too. Concrete poured before 1990 was often placed at 3 or 4 inches over almost no base prep. Modern work uses thicker slabs, compacted aggregate underneath, and controlled joints spaced for our climate specifically. And there are a few situations where replacement is simply the answer. Multiple sections settling at different rates, spalling across the whole surface with aggregate showing. Cracks coming back within a year of every repair you've done. The slab broken into more than 5 or 6 independent pieces. And this last one really matters, water pooling against your foundation because the pitch has reversed. If your driveway has settled back toward the house, it's pushing water at your basement every time it rains. That's how a surface problem turns into a foundation problem, and foundation problems cost a whole lot more to solve. One upside on replacement, though. If you're tearing out anyway, that's the cheapest moment to upgrade. A decorative finish, or even embedded heating elements so you're not shoveling. Doing that during a pour costs a fraction of retrofitting it later. Look, any contractor can glance at a driveway and quote you a full replacement. That's the easy call. The useful assessment is figuring out whether your base is intact, because that one fact drives every other decision on the job. If you're in Kenosha, Pleasant Prairie, Summers, Bristol, or anywhere around there, give us a call at Concrete Contractors, Kenosha. The number's 262-667-5367. We'll come walk the driveway with you before anything gets quoted, and if a repair is the better value, we'll tell you that straight. No pressure either way.